Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the Library of Congress. I am Andrew McCarthy Clark. I don't know why I had to read my name. It was Andrew McCarthy Clark. And I have the honor of working with the 2026 initiative, Fashion at the Library of Congress, the Threads That Connect Us. This is part of our library's commemoration of America 250, and it explores how fashion helps tell the American story from everyday dress to moments of national celebration, and how clothing reflects identity, creativity, and culture across our history. Tonight's event is our first on-site public event of this initiative. It runs through September. So thank you for being as we come out of the stables to some Derby humor. Thank you. In a kind of the vein of Netflix of, you watch this, so you might enjoy this. 3 events I'll point out to you for fashion. May 14th, we are screening The I Will Travel, a documentary about the legendary fashion editor, Deanna Vreeland. So her family, who created the documentary, will be interviewed and in conversation with Robin Gavon, fashion editor herself. That will be on May 14th. May 21st will be Small Clothes, Big Stories about fashion dolls, looking at dolls across history and how they've affected American style. That will also include American Girl. So I know we have a lot of American Girl fans. And the moderator for that will be Mara Wilson, who's a legendary millennial icon. You remember her from Matilda and Mrs. Doubtfire and Miracle on 34th Street. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So she will be moderating that on May 21st. And then July 23rd will be Fashion of the First Ladies. I know. Oh, there's some gasps. Thank you. Fashion of the First Ladies, where we will be doing a style review of 8 First Ladies, from Dolly Madison to Jackie Kennedy. And so we have some really great folks lined up for that as well, so that will be fun. Also want to mention that our initiative is made possible through the generous funding of the Ford Foundation, and you too can contribute to the fashion programs and programming at the Library of Congress. You can donate online at loc.gov/give, and you can become a friend of the Library of Congress and join the flock. So check that out. It's cool. Tonight's conversation focuses on one of the most enduring stages for public fashion in American life, the Kentucky Derby. For more than a century, the Derby has been more than a race. It has been a cultural ritual where tradition, craftsmanship, media, and personal expression come together in a way that is distinctly American. And at the library, we are fortunate to hold collections that document these moments through photographs, newspapers, and other materials, which many of you saw in the display. We can trace how Americans have dressed for public life across generations, and the Derby offers one of the most vivid and joyful examples of that tradition. We are joined this evening by 2 outstanding panelists. The first, Katrina Helmer, serves as Communications Director at the Kentucky Derby Museum, where she leads storytelling, media, and public engagement around one of America's most iconic cultural events. She's been there for almost 4 years, coming up close, 4 years. Before that was 10 years as a TV reporter, anchor, and producer in Louisville, where she covered the Kentucky Derby, its culture, tradition, fashion. And our second is Jenny Pfanenstiel, founder of Formé Millinery, and she's an award-winning milliner whose work has been featured at the Kentucky Derby and on national stages. She's a 7-time featured milliner of the Kentucky Derby, 10-time official milliner of the Kentucky Derby Museum, Tory Burch Foundation Fellow, and a Swarovski branding partner, and since we're at the Library of Congress, she is an author of a book, Making a Milliner. Also, as you may know, the Library of Congress has millions and millions and millions of treasures, millions. But one of our greatest treasures is moderating tonight, J.J. Harbster, who is the head of the library's science section, and she's been here for over 21 years in total. And I will also mention, today is JJ's birthday. Yes, I know. We're always grateful for JJ and all that she does to advance and animate the Library of Congress, and for spending her birthday with us, guiding this conversation. So please join me in welcoming JJ, Jenny, and Katrina.
So before we begin the panel, I really would like to take a moment to recognize Katrina and Jenny and the library's development office. This is something really special tonight, and I have been looking forward to it for a very long time. And just having you two here today to bring the Kentucky Derby to DC and to bring it to the library is just magnificent. So thank you very much for your time and your brilliance and everything. So thank you. So tonight we're going to talk about all things Kentucky Derby and fashion and hats and maybe a few other things. So I thought we would start off talking about fashion and Kentucky Derby. And we'll also have a question and answer after I have a conversation. So I have many questions. Which one to choose? Let's start one that's for both of you guys. So many people think of the Kentucky Derby as a race, but it's also one of the longest running fashion traditions in the United States. So how did the Derby become a place where spectators, especially women, were expected to dress so distinctively? Yes.
I'll answer that.
Yeah.
The Derby began in 1875, and it was modeled after races in England and in France, where they dressed to the nine and they really sported their best outfits. And they wanted to create a similar upscale event in Kentucky, and so they wanted you to wear your Sunday's best, and that included hats. And with hats, primarily they started out wearing the big brims, and the idea was also to stand out amongst the crowd. So a lot of people wore bigger hats to do that, and then down the road it became where the bigger the hat, the bigger the luck. So, yeah.
And to that point, you asked about women as well. The start of the Kentucky Derby, 1875, like Jenny mentioned, women were brought in specifically to this race. A lot of the racetracks were failing in Kentucky because it was just men betting and drinking. And then when they went over to Europe, they were like, we have an idea. Everyone's looking stunning and beautiful, and these race courses are thriving. Let's bring the ladies in. So ladies at that point had to be escorted. They also had to be invited. They couldn't bet, couldn't drink, but ladies saved horse racing, quite frankly. And the fashion, yeah, that deserves a round of applause. And that set the tone for that fashion to really shine. And so being able to say in the beginning of spring, oh, this is what I'm going to see. You saw that first at the racetrack. And so that just launched fashion, and it made such a huge impact, not just in Kentucky, but now you think of it nationally and internationally.
Yeah. So how do you see Derby fashion like reflecting the broader changes in American style? Like the dresses are getting shorter, or are they getting longer, are they getting bolder, are they like, what's going on?
Yeah, our historians at the Kentucky Derby Museum always say Derby history mirrors American history, and that goes for fashion as well. So the first outfits and hats you saw, that was very reflective of the time. Corsets, it was very restrictive, but that's what people wore. And then once you started to get into the 1910s, 1920s, 30s, 40s, things became a little looser, especially for women, and so the hem length got a little higher. You also had patterns that you could make your own fashion at home. And so then it became a little more accessible. It wasn't just you had to reach out and have someone make something for you. So that was really reflective of American fashion and how that's changed over time. And that goes with the hats, too.
Yeah, and I would say today's time, you'll see everything. Anything goes. You'll see horses on people's heads. You'll see suits with these crazy prints on them. So I love it. It's, some people go to Derby to see the horses. I think a lot of people go to see the outfits and hats.
It's a runway.
Yeah.
It is a true runway,
Yes,
the South.
Yes, it's amazing.
Do you have a particular favorite era? Because 152 years, there's lots of eras and lots of styles. Is there one that you kind of admire the most, or?
Well, I'm an old soul, so I'm always going to be more drawn to the 20s and 40s. I love the cloche and just the whole look and vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
I would agree. A lot of the beading, especially, and the feathers in that time frame, I just think is so beautiful.
Yeah. So let's talk hats. So the hat, I mean, it is, I feel, and I think you will agree with me, that the hat seems to be the most kind of iconic thing about the Kentucky Derby. So how did that happen? Why did it happen? It just sort of commands, I feel like the hat just kind of commands the space. And when we think of Kentucky Derby, we kind of think of the hat.
Yeah, a hat really should be looked at as any other accessory, your handbag, your shoes, jewelry. A hat certainly is the cherry on top, and it really completes a look. But yeah, they started wearing hats from the very beginning, and you know, again, the bigger the hat, the bigger the luck. But the fascinators really came into play, I believe, when Kate Middleton got married. A lot of people didn't even know what a fascinator was. And by the way, fascinator is what everybody's wearing right now. A fascinator is something that sits on your head with either a comb, a headband, elastic, where a hat covers your head. So the fascinator you really see now as a big part of what people wear at the races. But yeah, you know, it's a long day. You want to make sure that hat fits very well. You don't want it to be too tight or too loose, too heavy, you know, all that great stuff.
And that's changed over time too. 1875, you didn't leave the house without a hat on. It was always a part of what you wore, and now it's something special and unique, and that's changed over time in overall American fashion. But if you go to the Kentucky Derby and you don't have a hat on, you did it wrong. So
Stand out for sure.
yeah, for the wrong reasons, yeah. So I think that's really special, that this is a unique and fun place, that every single year all the hats come out.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting too, you know, people have compared preparing for Derby and what they're wearing to a wedding. I mean, it's the whole thing that has to coordinate together, and which is amazing. Some people start when Derby ends for the following year. But yeah, it's really special place, and you know, we have a red carpet, we have fashion shows that I'm usually a judge for, one of the judges at the track every day of the races. So yeah, you get to see everybody's spectacular outfit come together.
And everyone looks so good, by the way. Love all your hats.
Yes, y'all did a great job.
Can you share maybe a little bit how you became a milliner? Like, how did your journey go
Yes,
to
sure.
becoming a hat maker?
So I started sewing as a very young child. My mother and my grandmother sewed the clothes I wore and the toys I played with. And so kind of just naturally wanted to pursue sewing. And I have a fashion design degree from the Art Institute of Colorado in Denver. And I used to be a ballerina, so I had the idea and always wanted to make costumes for the ballet. And I did do that, and I did make costumes for Cirque du Soleil and movies and commercials, all that great stuff. But when I went to college in Denver, unless you were making ski wear or Western wear, there were not a lot of other opportunities in the late 90s. So I moved to Chicago to pursue costumes. And I loved it and I enjoyed it, but I'd always loved hats. And I wanted to learn, again, the traditional techniques. So what I do is I use a 200-year-old technique, which is molding over the wooden forms. And I went to Australia, to Wagga Wagga, which is in between Melbourne and Sydney, and learned the traditional techniques. And since I knew how to hand sew, it came very natural, and a light bulb went off, and that was 17 years ago. So, but yeah, I make hats, you know, using raw materials. There's particular materials made just for the millinery industry. This is called cineme. It's made in the Philippines. And what I do is I wet and steam the material over the wood. And I have hundreds of these because every hat that you see out there has to have some kind of form. And so I wet and steam the material over the wood, and then it dries, and then I hand stitch it together. It takes about 3 or 4 days to make one hat. Yeah.
So how do you balance like tradition and innovation. So if somebody comes to you for a derby hat, and is it something that, I guess it's up to them what they want, like something timeless or something that really, really stands out. Do you kind of blend that innovation, like of today, with maybe if there are new fabrics or something, with like that timeless way of making hats? Like, does it merge together or intertwine?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, people going to the Derby for the first time, I certainly come across people that have never worn a hat before, but they know they have to wear one, and so they want to partake in the celebration of it, and so they're not quite sure where to start. And so I have a hat shop in Louisville, Kentucky, and so the best thing to do is to come in, try on different shapes and styles that might work for you. If you're out of state or out of the country, I suggest finding pictures online of styles that you may like. But yeah, I think, trying on different styles to find out what's going to work best. Some of us are very lucky to be able to wear whatever we want on our heads. Others, certain styles look better. So you want something that's going to complement your physique, your hair length, your face shape. But yeah, so we start with the style of the hat, and then we look at all the raw materials that I have, and then we pick out the colors. But most of my hat blocks are vintage, and yes, they may appear and resemble like the 20s or 40s, but there are modern day hat blocks. There's 2 hat block makers left in the world that make them from scratch. So obviously those are newer hat blocks. And there's new materials that come out every once in a while, but for the most part, these have been around for a very, very long time. Again, mentioning that I was an old soul, I tend to use a lot of vintage embellishments in my work. Everything I do is one of a kind, but I also work with a flower maker in New York that makes them using the old traditional techniques as well with the stamping. So, but for me, I typically will, my client's looking for more of a classic type of look. I have had people come and say, will you glue a horse to a hat? And I'm like, nope, sorry. There's plenty of other people that are out there that may do that, but yeah, my clientele is typically a little bit more of a simpler look, flair kind of a thing.
So do you go thrifting or trying to find these vintage, you call them hat molds, hat boxes, or hat?
Yeah, so these, eBay is a good place. Okay. Sometimes you can find them in antique stores. I've inherited quite a bit from milliners that have retired. But yeah.
And then that curvy one, that's also a
Yes,
hat?
so this is a fascinator.
Oh.
Yeah, so this would kind of sit like that.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I have every different style and shape that you could imagine.
Do you have, I mean, I know this sounds, you probably get this all the time. Do you have like a favorite hat that you've made that, or like something that just, you were just so incredibly proud of?
Well, they're all my little babies.
That's what I was thinking.
They're all my little babies,
Yeah,
and I love seeing them on the person. For me, what makes me love what I do, especially if I'm making a hat for someone who doesn't typically wear hats, seeing them put on the finished hat for the first time and it transform them, you'll just see their confidence completely overtake them. They stand a little taller, they smile a little bigger, and it really makes me feel good and love what I do.
I definitely love a good hat. So let's move on to Kentucky Derby history and Churchill Downs and the racetrack. And this question would be for both of you. So last year I had the pleasure to go to opening day at Churchill Downs. I've never been. And when I was walking up to the racetrack and I saw the 2 twin spires, something just came over me. I got chills. Something ran through me, and I just started thinking about the history of this place. At that time it was 151 years, and I was just like, I'm walking through 151 years of history, and like now I'm part of that history too. So for you guys, like, what does the Kentucky Derby or Churchill Downs mean to you, or what, how does it make you feel?
We are just over a week away from the 152nd Kentucky Derby, so right now I'm stressed.
Okay.
But what I normally feel is just pure joy. Being able to walk onto the property. And the museum, just a little background, is a nonprofit, and it's separate from the racecourse itself, but we are right next door. And so we were founded 41 years ago, coming up this week. And our mission really is to live Derby every single day. So that feeling that you had when you walked through the gates and you saw the spires, that's what's really hard to express to a lot of people, is that it's not just a race, it's not just a week of racing, it doesn't just kick off the spring meet of racing. There's some sort of feeling that you get as soon as you're there that makes it really this social impact that really connects people somehow. There's this magical formula, either in the air or the bourbon, we don't know, that makes everyone just so happy. And so at the museum, that's such a challenge to be able to say, when you come through to the museum and you're learning about the history and we're giving you this experience and it's tactile, we want you to have that feeling when you walk away. And so our 360-degree movie that we have, and it runs every single day, it gives me chills, and it plays once an hour, and it gives me chills every day. But that's something that's so special to be able to express that. So I would say, to answer your question, except for these next 2 weeks for me, I feel joy. It embodies joy and community.
Yes, I never want to know how many days I have left till the Derby, because I'm just trying to finish all my custom. But for me, I love how the Derby makes the city come alive. Thunder over Louisville, which is our fireworks display, which is, by the way, amazing. That kind of kicks off the Derby celebrations, and then we have parades, concerts, parties leading up to the Derby. And I love how a lot of people are coming to Kentucky or Louisville for the first time a lot of times, and just how everyone gets to partake. The hotels, the restaurants, the different boutiques, and so there's lots of people seeing Kentucky and supporting local businesses during that time. So I just love that.
Yeah, it's become one of my favorite cities.
Yeah, it really is.
100%.
We love that.
Yes.
So speaking of 152 years, so that's how long the Kentucky Derby has been running. So with that history, and so this is a question for Katrina, and it might be the film. I was thinking, is there a story or an artifact that you connect with the most, or that really speaks to you, that you get to work with at the museum?
Yeah, we have 20,000 objects at the museum. Not all of those are on display. We have 2 floors of exhibits, and between our historians and our curators, it's incredibly important to them that every single year there's either a new exhibit or one of the existing exhibits gets a complete upgrade, because we recognize that we're a large attraction for the city of Louisville, and we want to keep it fresh every single time. And since Derby is essentially active history, there's so much to add all the time, and new stories to tell. So definitely our 360-degree movie is something that, if you didn't wear a hat to Derby and if you didn't see the movie when you went to the museum, you did it all wrong. But it's absolutely stunning, and it takes you through, in the course of 18 minutes, how a horse begins in the barns, and the 3-year journey in order to get to the Kentucky Derby, and then the race itself, the fanfare. So it really immerses you in, what is this race? It's not just a race. It's that entire tradition. It's that entire culture. So that, for sure. But I would say one of the objects that I just absolutely love, we brought a replica of it today, is we have a handful of Kentucky Derby trophies that have been donated to us from different winning teams. And we have the 1925 Kentucky Derby trophy. That's the second one that was ever made. It's for Flying Ebony. And that's really when it became a tradition between 1924 and 1925. You've seen a gold cup every single year since. It's made new every single year, and it's given to the owners. The Oaks Trophy is a perpetual trophy, but the 1925 trophy, the horseshoe is actually pointed this way, pointed down, and then decades later, because horse people are notoriously superstitious, they've now since flipped the horseshoe the other way so that your luck doesn't run out. So I think that's just such a fun little tidbit, and it connects you to history and something fun and unique, and that's one of my favorite items in there.
May I add? Oh, so mine's a little bit of a selfish answer, but I have a couple hats that are part of the permanent collection at the museum, and it's a hat with matching masks that was worn during COVID to the Derby, because the Derby, and you can certainly speak more about this, the specifics, but the attendance was dropped dramatically. I believe it was just owners and trainers that were able to attend, and you had to wear a mask. So I made masks that coordinated with the hats, and it was in a awareness circle also, which was great. But I donated a fascinator, a sculpted fascinator, and a fedora that I made for the gentleman with the coordinating mask. So, because during COVID, Derby still happened.
And that reminds me of when my colleagues and I were reviewing items from the library's collection to put on display, we came across a collection of Kentucky Derby stories from Frank G., I think Menike, who is Colonel Wynn's press agent in during World War II era. And all of these books were published during World War II. And so it made me pause and go, the Kentucky Derby was running during World War II, and it was. Can you talk a little bit about things that were going on during World War II in the Derby?
So, fun fact, the Derby is the longest continuously running sporting event in America. So we've run every single year for 152 years. It has changed dates a couple times due to things like world wars and the pandemic, but we still ran it within the course of that year. During that era, actually, the infield of the track turned into kind of a base for soldiers, kind of turned into a makeshift camp at one point. And then also, fun fact, the mint julep glasses that are kind of iconic collector's items now, because there was a shortage on glass in that time, they still made that, but they made it out of plastic. And so we have in our collection every single Derby glass and Oaks glass that's ever been created, and those are some really unique ones to see, because you're like, what is this colorful plastic in this era? But they still made one. So I think that kind of goes to speak to between COVID, the pandemic, between the racetrack almost went bankrupt twice and still persevered, and I think it goes to that sense of community that Jenny was talking about. It really is rooted in Kentucky and rooted in Louisville, and there's something to, even if the rest of the world doesn't come to this race, we're still going to do it.
How much time do we have? Because I want to save for questions, Q&A. Okay, so I have a couple of closing questions, and I'm sorry if I take your question that you want to ask. My first question is, so if I'm a first timer to the Kentucky Derby, what do you recommend I wear? And any other recommendations for me if I'm a first timer?
I'll start, yes. So it's a long day, especially if you're going more than one day. So I know you may want your heels for your outfit, but don't do it. Or have a pair of flats in your bag. because you're standing, walking, and your feet will kill you. Well, you don't know how many times we see people leaving the track completely barefoot, even in super nice clothes. And then, of course, with the hat, you want to find a hat that's going to fit you properly. Again, with being a long day, I've unfortunately seen people that will get to the track and after an hour they take their hat off because it just doesn't fit them properly or it's too heavy. So you definitely want to wear proper headgear.
Do you have any advice?
And bring your cash. You got to put the bets down.
You only take cash.
Yeah, you can only bet cash at the track, and it's still a base bet is just $2. So always bet on the long shot.
What should we expect from the Derby fashion this year? Are there things we should be looking out for? I was kind of reading up on some stuff, and they were saying like 3D appliques or something on dresses. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, well, white is the color, Pantone color of the year, so you'll see a lot of people wearing white or incorporating it. But, really, like I mentioned earlier, anything goes. But I will say some of the traditions is that you've got Oaks, which is the day before Derby. It's the fillies, the female horses that race. We also celebrate breast cancer. We have a breast cancer parade at the track. So a lot of people will wear or incorporate pink into their outfit. And then for Derby, it's Run for the Roses. So some people will incorporate the red. Yep.
I definitely think everything goes. We will try to predict some of the trends. At the museum, we actually have a fashion show in March. All of our featured milliners will bring out their latest and greatest and absolute stunning pieces to walk a runway. And then you go to the track and you're still blown away. There's always a surprise, and it's really fun being able to point out and say, like, I know that's one of Jenny's hats, or I know that's so-and-so's hats, and you can recognize them after a while. And I think that's the best part, is we can predict all the trends, but really it's Derby Day that then will be setting the trends moving forward.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Do we have a mic runner, or should I be a mic runner? So questions. Do we have questions for Jenny or Katrina? We do have a question over here. Should I?
Oh, yay! That's the chicken or the egg question, hat or dress first. Yes. I have my theory. I go with hat first. I like my headwear to be the focal point, and you can always find some sort of matching colors to go with it. I like for my hat to be the focal. And some people do just the opposite. You can always find a hat to match in the other direction. So see, yeah.
Yeah, I recommend starting with the hat as well because, you can always find an outfit. What you don't want is to find this fabulous outfit and not find the right hat to go with it, and then you're stuck getting whatever, and then it not properly fitting you, perhaps. So, yeah, and your hat is your focal point.
Well, for someone new, I think that's a good tip. Start with your hat.
Yes, it is. And I love hats. So, and I love buying hats. And we have a question over here.
Hi, I grew up in Louisville, and I was wondering if you guys could talk about the way that outside influences, obviously people come from all over the country and all over the world to Derby, have an influence on fashions, and whether that's shifted in the modern era.
Yeah, I think, with Kate Middleton getting married, that really brought the fascinator to the Derby. Most people didn't even know what that word meant until seeing Kate Middleton get married. But yeah, I would say fascinators now are a big part of what people wear. One that they're usually one size fits all, and a lot of times people wear a fascinator to Oaks and the brim to the Derby or vice versa. So that's probably one of the biggest trends I've noticed.
I think too, European fashion and Australian fashion for horse racing definitely has a different tone to it. And there's a lot more, clean cut lines, sleek type of a feel. And I think we're starting to see a lot more of that come into the track in Kentucky. What I really love, though, is that there's still that flair factor. I've been to a lot of different race courses around the world, and there's still something when you say, "Oh, I'm with the Kentucky Derby Museum," or "I went to Churchill Downs," and they're like, "You guys do fashion a little on the edge, don't you?" And you say, "Yes," proudly. So even though I think some of those international influences are starting to creep into the track, and I say that with love, there's still a unique thread to the fabric there for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of rules. When you go to Ascot, your
We don't have
fascinator has
rules.
to be a certain size, and we don't have rules. So that's why you see a little bit of everything.
Question over there too.
Yes, thank you so much. And you are powerful women, and you're successful. We all love fashion. What would you tell my daughter who I brought tonight? How can we empower women who are prominently in this room through fashion, but also the Kentucky Derby? And what's your experience as a woman who made it?
I'll go. Women in racing is a really incredible topic, and our historian who wrote the book that we brought here today, she's done a lot of research. The first female that was in the Kentucky Derby was only in 1970. Women weren't allowed to race professionally until the 60s. There have been a lot of female owners in the industry, female trainers, but women are coming more and more into the spotlight from the industry standpoint that is the backbone of horse racing. And I think fundamentally it goes to the very beginning race of they had to have women at the track in order to make this successful and to make it different and to make it thrive. And so I think that has been an underlying current for the Kentucky Derby the entire time. And being able to look at the track now, it's women that are buying the tickets to come. It's women that are saying, "No, I already got you your suit, and yes, you're wearing pink, like we're going." And that is a major economic engine to not just Louisville, but to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And I think that's really impressive to say that horse racing, this massive industry, has such a power through women.
Yeah, and with regards to hats, a lot of fashion designers, Chanel being one of them, they started out as milliners and making hats for the Derby. Yeah.
Do we have another question? Yes, we do. Oh, he's coming. Oh, you got a loud voice. Okay.
I'm curious on a practical level, as a hat designer, as a milliner, a rare breed. I mean, I know you're busy in March and April making hats, and for the rest of the year, you make hats for shows. I know women will come in for a hat because they know they can do that. And of course, you have to be in Louisville to come to you. During the rest of the year, are you working for theaters or movies or plays or specific purposes for entertainment?
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
wondering how you sustain yourself. And,
Yeah.
it's such a finite. Our son is a menswear designer, and we always wondered how is he going to make money? How is he going to do this? And I wonder the same thing about you. How does it all work out? How do you translate that into
Yeah.
a profession?
Sure. So when I started this 17 years ago, I certainly didn't think I'd be in the position I am now. I started making hats in Chicago, and because I make hats for all seasons and occasions, not just Derby. And I would go to art shows and I would sell my hats. And one of the events I did was at the One of a Kind show at the Merchandise Mart. the woman next to me was like, have you ever made hats for the Derby? And unfortunately, I was like, I wasn't exactly like, what's the Derby? But, being from Colorado and Chicago, it's not like Kentucky. But so she's like, I think you would do very well there. Because at that time, I was just kind of making winter hats. I had clients that would go to luncheons and galas and fundraisers and so forth and holiday parties. So I'd make hats for those types of occasions, women's clubs, in Chicago. But I ended up going to Louisville, and I made appointments with some boutiques and sold hats out of the trunk of my car. And I sold out in one day, and I was like, wow, people really like hats here. and not to mention, I fell in love with Louisville. I just was amazed of how supportive the town was, and just how nice everybody was. And so I would make hats in Chicago, and I would rent a hotel room for 2 months, and I would make hats and bring all my hat blocks and sewing machines and so forth. And then I do trunk shows at boutiques and hotels, and that's kind of how I built my clientele until I moved to Kentucky in 2014. But most of my customers who are repeat customers, and they wear hats for a lot of different events. So I make hats for weddings, for people to go skiing. I've had people buried in my hats. So I make hats for all occasions. But I also collaborate with a lot of companies. So I don't usually, I'm not employed like at a theater or anything. I have 3 hat shops. One is Formé Millinery, which is the couture hat shop. Is in the New Butchertown area near downtown Louisville. And then we have Judith M. Millinery Supply House, which is where my husband spends most of his time. That's in LaGrange, Kentucky, and we sell the raw materials what we do there. And it's been around for almost 30 years, so we purchased it from someone who was retiring and brought it to LaGrange, Kentucky. And we sell raw supplies to like Disney, to Warner Brothers, to their costume departments to make hats for whatever projects they're working on. So every hat that you see, in the movies, commercials, they have to get their supplies from somewhere, so a lot of them come from us. And then we have the hat shop, which is more geared towards the hat decorator, so kind of like what you did here today. We have bases and brimmed hats that are already made, and then the feathers and flowers and ribbons and all that great stuff. But so that certainly keeps me very busy running 3 shops. But I also collaborate with like Woodford Reserve, Old Forester, and Churchill Downs and the Derby to make hats for limited collections and Swarovski crystals. So right now, I'm an official product of the Kentucky Derby, which means, like your mint julep cup or your Kentucky Derby hat. Those are all official products. And I have a collection that I do for Churchill Downs where you can, and I got this idea from the collection kind of, based on snow globes. When you go to Florida, for instance, you sometimes will find a globe with the Florida sand in it. So what I've done this year is create a collection where you can, I gathered dirt, actual track dirt, and roses from the track, and I've embedded it into acrylic and epoxy. And I made the embellishments on the hats, like the bow tie for the gentleman on the fedora, a horseshoe rose on a brimmed hat, and I was even given original paddock wood from the 1800s from the track, and I make wooden feathers that will go on the fedoras. So. Yes, so I'm very busy. I've collaborated with Vineyard Vines for the last 10 years, and I create their fascinators for them. And that typically starts when Derby ends, starting to make the samples for Vineyard Vines. And so we make anywhere from 500 to 1,000 fascinators just for Vineyard Vines. So, yeah.
And
I've come a long way making hats from my basement in Chicago.
You just reminded me, and I just realized this. We didn't talk about men and men's hat and men's fashions. And was that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Fedoras are probably the most popular hat that you see at the Derby. Some will wear top hats or bowlers, but I would say fedoras are the most popular style. But yes, they're usually the lady is starting with the hat, and then the men is coordinating with with that. But because I have a shop, I make hats that have adjustable sweatbands in them to fit multiple head sizes. But if you're someone who has trouble finding a hat off the rack, yes, I definitely do custom men's hats all the time as well. But I would say, women are always going to wear hats at the track. You do see some men that aren't, but but yeah.
I would say too that like European racing, you have to have your top hat and tails. There's strict rules and guidelines for men and women, like Jenny was saying, depending on where you're at in the track there. I would say for the Kentucky Derby, men tend to go a little wackier if they're going to go ahead and put some hats on. And it's very entertaining. If you go just for people watching alone, you're going to have the best time of your life. But the top hats and the bowler hats were very much, if you look at all of the old black and white photos, all the men had hats on. So I would say that part of the tradition probably hasn't stuck as strong.
And I was just thinking about the Derby hat. I'm like, is that a connection? I mean, I was just like, there's the Derby hat. But you wouldn't wear a Derby hat at the Kentucky Derby, right? Or would you? I mean, I feel like that's a heavy hat to wear like in spring in Kentucky.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And it's typically made, of a felt of some kind. Yeah, you don't want to wear felt to the Derby.
No.
Now it has snowed
We've had
at a
snow,
Derby,
rain.
but it is spring, and so I would definitely wear a straw of some kind.
Do we have any more questions? I do have a final question about the future. No. Well, it is kind of the future. So when future historians look back on the Kentucky Derby, what do you think they would say about American creativity, our identity, in relation to the Kentucky Derby when they're looking back at the Kentucky Derby? Like, what do you think they would say, like 50 years from now or something?
Well, I know that the museum did a time capsule, that you can talk about, which is going to be exciting. I probably won't be around when they open it up. But, I mean, I think the museum has a great, showcase of from the beginning to what it is today. It's hard to say, what it'll be like in 50 years. Maybe we'll be going to the Derby with robots on our arms, coming with us as our date. I don't know.
I think to your question, kind of the key thought for us at the Derby is that tradition. And so I would hope in 50 years they would still be able to look back and say, they pushed the limit, but they still had the hats, or they still had the fashion, and there was still that thread of what started the Derby in 1875. We do have a time capsule. We put it together right ahead of Derby 150, and in our brilliance, we're like, we'll open this 50 years later. So that's someone else's problem. But we did, and we opened our doors for free to the entire community, and we said, come celebrate Derby with us and contribute to the time capsule. And what was fascinating when we were cataloging everything that people were dropping in, it was their photos of when they've been to the track, and they marked them and dated them and said who they were with. And it was photos at the track, it was photos of Derby parties they've had at home. And I just thought that was so special. People were dropping their memories in. So I think that, to me, if I'm reflecting 50 years ahead, it'll still be a thought of there's some tie of original Derby fashion, original Derby hats, and that tradition will stay.
I think we're done. If there's no more questions, right? No. Okay. Thank you.
you so much for having us.